Good afternoon, members. We'll call to order the Committee on Jobs and Economic Development. Today is Wednesday, March 5th. I'm proud to say that a quorum is present, just so that folks know that we have senators who are present in person, and then we also have Senator Draheim, Senator Pa, and some others who are online. So just so that you know, we have a quorum. And I hope that, well, I'm glad that everyone was able to make it here safely and without any issue despite the snow. I got up this morning, looked out and saw the beautiful snow, but I didn't necessarily want to drive in it, but I was forced to drive in it. So I'm happy that I'm here, and I'm happy that you're here and that you made it here safely. Today, we will be hearing an update on the Promise Act from our partners in DC, MEDA, and the Minnesota Initiative Foundations. And then we will hear the deed budget bill, Senate File number 1832, which I will present. One of the reasons why I wanted us to have an update to the Promise Act, like anything and any initiative, we want to see what has been done up to this particular point, ask questions, and also get suggestions from our partners. If there are any modifications or changes that they would suggest, to tell us what those things are as well. And then we'll see, like anything else, whether we're going to adopt those changes when we have our omnibus bill. But with that being said, members, feel free to ask questions because we think that this is what this is all about. I'm going to also ask Tom and also Taylor to make sure that they're paying attention online and let me know if someone has their hand up, because it's very difficult for me to sometimes see if their hand is up or not. So with that being said, we will have NDC come up first, which is the Neighborhood Development Corporation. If you come to the testifiers table, and I think we have both Renee Dossman, who's the president and CEO from NDC, and Shahir Ahmed, who's vice president of business services. And so thank you and welcome to the committee. Thank you for all your work. And if you would be so kind as to state your name for the record and go forward with your presentation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Renee Dossman, President and CEO of Neighborhood Development Center.
Shahir Ahmed, Vice President of Business Services of Neighborhood Development Center.
All right. Thank you, Chair Champion, Vice Chair Mohammed, Ranking Minority Member Draheim. I'm Renee Dossman, President and CEO of NDC, and today we're here to discuss the Minnesota Promise Act grant program, which was led by Senator Champion and former Representative Hassan. I would like to go to the next slide and talk about setting the stage. So I can barely remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I'd like you to go back to 2023 and think about what situation we were in with these entrepreneurs. The pandemic was still looming. They were unable to access all of the funds that were coming through from the federal government because they couldn't get to them fast enough and the funds were running out. And you heard them and you made a bold and historic decision to pass this legislation to help those entrepreneurs. Not only did you do that, we did it in partnership. You asked NDC after, we've been around for over 30 years supporting entrepreneurs. You asked us. You asked MEDA to do the loans. You asked the initiative foundations to do loans and grants, all under the guidance and leadership of DEED. And so we are really grateful for you for this and for hearing the call and answering the call for these entrepreneurs. So what is the Promise Act? For some of you that might not be familiar, it's a $72 million grant program. Like I said, it's in partnership with DEED. The eligibility is it was established in 2021. Your business needed to be established then, registered with the Secretary of State. You had to have gross revenue of less than $750,000, and obviously your business needed to be in operation. What I loved about the Promise Act is it was very focused out to the street level and geographies for North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, and St. Paul. In addition, the grant amounts were up to $50,000 based on your revenue. There was a special carve out for those that had revenue less than $100,000 to make sure that those smaller businesses received the funds. One of the things, too, that I think was special is about the usage, the ability for the entrepreneurs to be able to use it for business operations, rent and utilities, payroll. We've asked, anecdotally, are not required to do reporting, but we've asked if you've received a grant, would you mind sharing with us how you've used it? We have some testimonies in this presentation, and the main thing that they've used it for has been equipment, payroll, and rent, which is exactly in line with where you guys set this up. The executive summary walks through, I'll talk a little bit more about community organizations in the presentation, but we were able to distribute in this first round, and we'll talk about some of the challenges, but $7.34 million in grants awarded to 487 businesses with an average grant size of $15,000, which that's astounding, that grant size. So you know that this money was needed in community. We started off, and we'll talk about it a little bit, with 6,000 applications, down to 3,000 because a lot of those people were not eligible. Then it went down to 1,300 from that because there's not enough money to cover all the businesses, and we ended up with 487. And I'll talk to you about a little bit of the gap between why that happened as well. And some challenges that we encountered in round one. It was, I got to be honest with you, sitting here, I have to be honest, it was a stretch for NDC to do this program. We're very honored to have been able to, the opportunity to do it, but it was tough. We had some legislative intent and interpretation challenges that caused us to pause for 6 months. We are very aware of the spotlight that's on us and that's on all of us from a fraud mitigation standpoint. So we took extra care, special care, probably you could say too much care. We have a 5-step stage process for the applications. We also have about 12 documents that the entrepreneurs have to administer. We built an entire tech platform from scratch. That was an astounding feat. We did testing of that platform. We also kept running information sessions, over 50 of them, for entrepreneurs to get ready and know how to apply and all of those things. And then there's a couple key points: the digital divide, the entrepreneur's ability to use technology to access this program. And the biggest thing, and Senator Draheim and I talked about this, is the ability, the financial literacy of these entrepreneurs to be able to have their to have completed their taxes, to have their taxes done, to know how to read their taxes. You built this program to help local businesses, and one of the main things that you wanted to access was lack of access. You wanted to correct was lack of access to capital. 74% of the entrepreneurs said it definitely helped them with access to capital. As we talk about the community partners, here's the deal. NDC's been around for 30 years. You gave this money, and we are great stewards of it, to NDC, but we knew that we could not get into community and do the things that we needed to do without community partners. So here's a list of the different community partners that are here. The thing with the community partners, it was a part fraud mitigation, because they're in these communities, they know these entrepreneurs that are coming in these neighborhoods. They represent all of the key areas. But it was also because we wanted to be able to get into those neighborhoods with the language of those neighborhoods. So we did sessions in Spanish and Hmong and Somali, as well as obviously English. So I know without a doubt we would not have been able to do the program we did without the community partners. I will tell you that for the future, we're shifting their focus to help us with more TA, and I'll explain a little bit more about that, the why on that later. So as we look at the timeline, here's the deal. I don't have time to go through the complete timeline, so I'm just going to highlight a few key points, and you guys have copies of this, and you can ask questions and look at it at your will. But we officially signed the contract in 2023 with DEED. We were building out the portal, like I talked about, running those sessions to understand the Promise Act. Like I mentioned, we had 6,000 applications that came through. All of them were not eligible because they were not they did not meet the eligibility. They were not in the neighborhoods. They did not have businesses open long enough. And then we did have a pause to make sure that we truly understood the legislative intent and interpretation of the law. DEED built out a review portal to assist us with this. We manually checked each business against their zoning and their addresses to ensure what kind of business they were. We would begin distributing awards again, and then we had a pause because we had to look at some 2021 tax guidelines and get some more attestations, I think that's the right word, from our entrepreneurs, which took time. And we still have a segment of entrepreneurs that are still gathering their data that we are addressing. The good news is that in spring 2025, we're back. And with all the learnings that we had, we feel like we can move forward faster with your confidence. Senator Pratt, we will be going into the metro in the fall. I know you have been wanting us to do that, and we will be able to do that in the fall. And we will also be able to hit Uptown, the $1 million for Uptown. We're going to do that actually coming up this spring. Fraud mitigation. So here's the deal. There's just a tension that we see between, we want the entrepreneurs to get the information, and we don't want them to have to do a lot to get the money, because that's what we're hearing in community. We always have to jump through all these hoops, all of that stuff. But then we also want to verify that they are who they say they are and that their business is legit. So there's just a natural tension there. So that's where the verifications come in. We built out a platform to verify their identities securely and efficiently. The 5-step program, it starts at NDC, our accountants look at it, it goes to DEED, and DEED looks at the applications as well, so very thorough. And then NDC is also doing a third-party audit, financial audit of the Promise Act. NDC needed to keep going even though the Promise Act was going. So as a result, the Promise Act has its own team and its own financials, so we're gonna make sure that we are good stewards of this money. We understand the assignment. Round 1 awards. It's exciting. We did get out, in spite of everything that we went through, we did get out $3 million to South Minneapolis, $2.6 million to St. Paul, and $1.7 to North Minneapolis. We estimated back of the envelope that we would need about an additional $280 million to hit all the entrepreneurs. I know that's not feasible. We're grateful for what we received, but that means that all the entrepreneurs will not receive the funds that might qualify. Some key learnings. I've talked a little bit about technology and digital divide, but the piece that I want to highlight here is that 80% of the applicants needed substantial support. So they still needed guidance. They called in. We had 1,700 hours of TA. We had over 2,200 applicants ask for help, which tells us we need to move that process to the beginning to help them, to get them ready even more than we thought we did before. A lot of the applicants lacked the digital skills to navigate. We now have a better app and a better process and better tools and technology for mobile optimization, as well as more in-person support. This is what kept our entrepreneurs out of receiving. That's why we didn't want to do all the money at once, because it would keep these entrepreneurs from being able to access it, which is exactly what happened to them during the pandemic. Communication and clarity. The applicants struggled to understand and to receive our emails. Our system didn't work well to get them the information that they needed. We've since enhanced that. We've added different technology to do that. What we want is real-time status updates for the entrepreneurs so that they know where they are in the process, and we've done that now with SMS notifications. The final piece is the taxes and financial literacy. I talked about that. To be honest with you, it's changing how we do things at NDC. All of our programs now are really laser focused on making sure that entrepreneurs understand the financials. It's great that you're starting a business, but you have to do your taxes and you have to understand the financials. So we are, as we speak, doing virtual tax workshops to help the entrepreneurs with that. As we look forward to next steps, we're launching in the spring of 2025. We're looking to add, we've adjusted the role of community partners to go forward versus backwards. We're looking to add more upfront technical assistance. This new 0.5% per point granted to brick and mortar businesses so that we can get closer in alignment to what the intent and interpretation of the law. Like I mentioned, we're going to expand into Uptown, into greater Minnesota, or into the metro in fall of 2025, Uptown in spring. Continued fraud mitigation, we are not taking our foot, even though it's a tension, we are not taking our foot off the brake on that one. We need additional staff to strengthen the work streams and leverage technology. And then finally, and I know I'm talking really fast because I only had 10 minutes, but finally, I want to say the amendments that we've proposed. We want to change the eligibility from 2021 taxes to prior 2 years. There were a lot of those entrepreneurs, if you think about the 6,000 that went down to the 3,000 that couldn't apply, that had businesses that needed support. We also would like to add a preference point for businesses and operations from 2021. Like if you were in business during that time, you get preference. You get a point for preference. And then we would love to define prior years as the point of applicants most recent, as the point of their application when they complete their application to be able to go back 2 years. Finally, I'd like to end with a special person to us, Shantae Holmes. She's the owner of All Washed Up in North Minneapolis. She received a $31,000 grant. You can see she used that grant to wrap her vehicle. Shantae mentioned that this Promise Act, and she wanted to be here today, but the snow kept her away. But she sent a note, and she's also done a testimony here, and she wanted to say, she's like, this grant helped her to fly and to dream and to do. And I want you guys to know that's what you created with this law and with this program. And I hope that you give NDC the opportunity to do the same and to continue and to move forward with efficiency and with purpose. Our learning should not be for naught. We want to continue this program and get the rest of this money out. And I hope that was less than 10, and I'll close. And thank you so much for that, your time.
Thank you for that information. That was well done, if I could say so myself. And thank you for the recommendations. We did know and did have an opportunity to talk with you and others about some of the recommendations, and we have those recorded already.
Okay.
And if there's anything else that you can think of between now and later, just let us know that as well.
We will.
Any questions from the committee for Ms. Dossman or her other testifier? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you had time yet to evaluate the success of the different grantees as far as how, well, I think I read some here, how the finances were used, but how did that, or are you able to know how that helped propel them forward? Or do you have any of those anecdotes about how the funding has helped their business grow?
Ms. Dossman.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Thank you. Yes, we actually have. We've heard, here's the deal. With the law, it did not require us to get reporting from the entrepreneurs, receipts, or any of that stuff. So we had it be voluntary in the grant application, and we follow up with some of them. We take a selection, and we did a test. When we were building out the portal, we had some entrepreneurs that went through that test, and we got a lot of that testimony. So when I talked about the intention of the law was to help them with their business operations, with payroll, with equipment. To be honest, a lot of them used it for equipment, like Shantae used it to get equipment and to support her staff with payroll. And then several of them have used it for rent. So it is truly meeting the needs of what the intent of the law was. And it's been rewarding to see and to hear those entrepreneurs and their excitement. If you think about it, they were left behind. And so to get this money has been a tremendous blessing to many of them.
Thank you.
Any follow-up or any additional questions from any member of the committee? Senator Hurd.
Mr. Chair, I'm just here, but we're on NDC at the moment. Okay. And about the Promise Act, I really support this project, but I just wonder, like just from my standpoint, I hear from my constituents over the confusion of zip code, and then we had to intervene and make sure that everything are in place. And at the same time, the process was slowing down, and a lot of people call my office and what's going on? We applied, so a lot of confusion there. Maybe I want to hear if NDC can give us a little explanation and see whether it's more hope. I definitely will support it, but just want to make sure that the process coming again is more efficient, so that my office don't get bombarded with calls from communities.
I understand.
Thank you, Senator Hurd. Let me say this. Earlier, they did talk about their key learnings, and a part of their key learnings, from my understanding, around communication and clarity, was that they, looked at the applicant's struggle with email updates and tracking status and that sort of thing. And then the solution was they enhanced their tech and faster support. But they also talked about the importance of real-time updates and SMS notifications, because one of the things that they talked about was individuals who were like, where are we in the process? What is our eligibility? That's how I understood that testimony. But we'll go to Ms. Dossman to see if I'm correct or see if there's anything else that she would like to share.
Thank you, Senator Champion. That's spot on. And for you in particular, we had some conversations. To be honest with you, like I said, we were learning and building this plane as we were flying it, and the technology piece was new to us, to be honest. And I think what happened, especially in the situations that you're referring to, is that our system did not acknowledge those zip codes. Because we had to go street by street in order to make sure that we were in compliance with the geography that was stated in the law, and we missed some, to be quite honest. As soon as you brought that to our attention, we corrected it. For this next round, everything's been verified, we're good to go. I think there's also, just in general, there's just not enough funds that are here for every person, especially in St. Paul. So I think that's part of it as well, but we acknowledge, and that was clunky and not acceptable.
And if I could say this, one of the reasons why we're having this update, and one of the things that I often talk to our partners about, is there is also success in learnings, right? You know, that sometimes things don't go exactly as you planned it, and then as you're working through it, you figure out what's necessary and needed, and you make the adjustment that still benefits the program itself and the people that you are attempting to serve. Sometimes we just hear people come in and just say, oh, look at all the great things I'm doing, but they never, ever tell us where their challenges were. So any other questions? Senator Hurd.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Dawson, thank you for the clarification. I'm with you on that. You know, everything is not, smooth, or shiny as silver as we first try. It's the intent, and I'm myself very forgivable, and I'm sure people in my community are forgivable as well. But I think I just want to, hear your thought, and so it reassure the next round that things will be better, and they are anticipate to make sure that the dollar that they get generate back to our economy and boost up our economy during situation that we are facing now. People are nervous too at the same time. But thank you.
Any other closing comments based on what he said? I almost called you Senator Dossman, but
Oh, no.
it's one of those things that almost slipped out. And
I
said,
know,
okay?
it was a Freudian.
Anything else, Ms. Dossman, were you going to close what he says, and then I'll see if there's any other questions from the committee.
Thank you, Senator Champion. I can assure you we have worked out the kinks. I think pretty much everything but the kitchen sink has been thrown at us. And we've handled it. The Promise Act team at NDC is outstanding, and we've learned along the way. And to Senator Champion's point, we are being transparent. One of our guiding principles is to be transparent and honest, and I couldn't come here and not be honest and say there were some mistakes that were made, but I honestly feel like we have learned and we know what we need to do going forward. And if you entrust us to continue, we can get this money out a lot faster, just because we understand the process and the new aligned role of our community partners.
Any other questions for Ms. Dossman? Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the history as well. And so if I'm not mistaken, so it looks like about 10% of the grant was distributed, and that leaves 90% left, which is probably, what would that be? $60 million left to distribute. And
We have 65 million.
65 million, excuse me.
That's okay.
And so looking at a $65 million grant distribution here in round 2, do you anticipate that all of that will be distributed? I mean, I'm hearing from my colleague here that some people weren't able to access these funds for various reasons. Do you think that the entire 65 million will be distributed in the next round here?
Ms. Dossman.
I'm actually going to turn that over to Shahir. Mr. Ahmed.
Identify yourself for the record and go forward with your testimony. Thank you.
Shahir Ahmed, thank you, Senator. Yes, we anticipate with this next round being able to ensure that the dollars are going to get out into the community within waves. We've now restructured our process to be more efficient and more to be faster. And as Ms. Dossman mentioned, the role of our community partners will also help preparation of the applicants before they're in the application portal.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Follow-up, Senator Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And then one of the questions I wondered about earlier was, were you able to gather any data about how the grant helped the grantee move forward advance, that type of thing? Or, was it just a Band-Aid? And you had mentioned that you weren't able to actually ask for that information. Now, is there anything preventing you in round 2 to get some of the information about how the grants were used, how they prospered the business or encouraged business growth or something like that? Is there anything preventing you from getting that kind of information going forward?
And before we go to Ms. Dossman, it's my understanding what she said is that the law itself did not require it, but they volunteered and collected that information. I thought she shared that with us, and that they really collected it. But let's go to Ms. Dossman and see if I'm correct, and/or if there's anything else that we can do to make sure that there's additional reporting if so needed.
Yes, thank you, Senator Champion. The answer to your question is yes, we are collecting that. But it's volunteer from them. It's not required. So we are gathering what they said. And so when I talked about, I don't have right with me here the percentages from what we've received back, but what we know that they used it for, several of them used it for. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I do have the percentages. Thank you. 30% used it for payroll. 20% used it for rent and mortgage, 8% used it for utilities, 28% used it for equipment, and 13% used it for other expenses.
Senator Nelson, follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's helpful very much. And then just thinking about going forward with the 65 million grant going forward. And maybe this is a question for you or for our staff. So just because the law does not require reporting, can the granting organization require reporting? In other words, kind of back to my original question, is there anything that would prevent you from requiring reporting about how the money was used by the grantee?
And so to your question, I think what they've demonstrated is that there is a need to get the information and try to track that information, and then they collected it. But because we're looking at potential modifications or to the law itself, if we believe that there needs to be some sort of mandated reporting from the grantees to the grantor, then perhaps that's something that we can consider and think about. Ms. Dossman.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Yes, I think that would be, we would need your support with that. I think what I will tell you is that what we don't want to do is slow down the process. You know, we finally got this figured out and we're moving, and I also don't, like if we're talking about the team having to match receipts and all of that kind of stuff, I think as long as we can come up maybe with something, we can work on it together, what that could look like. I think that would be, we could do that.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I kind of, if I misunderstood you, don't hesitate to tell me. I understood that you might have liked to have gotten more information, but it wasn't required. The law did not require it. That's what I understood. And so there's a couple things. One, yes, the law can be strengthened, and I know I've had some suggestions in the past, maybe not for this particular grant, but about how we can strengthen our process to ensure that the dollars are doing and going to the places that we think, and that they're benefiting the grantees. And so I still think that's important, and I'd look forward to maybe visiting with you to know if there's something that you would like to see that you would think would be helpful, and if it's something that we need to put into legislation. So perhaps we can follow up on that.
And again, Senator Nelson, if you, once you all meet, if there's some other suggestion, we are certainly open to those things as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Dossman before we go to MEDA? Oh, you had another question?
Oh, well, no, I was just gonna mention that $65 million is a significant amount of money. And I think taxpayers need to know that this was a good investment, and they can do that through having information about what that investment did. And so I'm just still a little unclear about, is there new legislation required or not? But we can figure that out, and I appreciate your help going forward with that.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I wasn't really going to say anything, but a couple of things came up. First of all, Ms. Dossman, thanks for addressing the broader needs in the metro area. One of my concerns with the Promise Act all along is just how narrowly geographic this was, and not recognizing that, you know, we are a broader metropolitan area that has business development by all sorts of people in our communities. And, you know, certainly Scott County is one of those that I am a large advocate for, and making sure that, you know, we have an equal shot at competing with Hennepin County. But I think Senator Nelson brings up, and I'm presuming, Mr. Chair, that we're going to see a statutory change in the Promise Act to allow Ms. Dossman to do that. But I think Senator Nelson brings up an interesting point. You know, just in the last couple of years, and particularly I'd say in the last 6 to 9 months, hearing about the fraud and waste that's occurred in other programs. I think none more notorious than what's happened at Human Services, and not only and the Department of Education. Not only the lack of basic financial controls, as we talked about in finance, not following the legislative auditor's recommendations, but just the lack of reporting and follow-up. And Mr. Chair, if you know, we're not required to collect this information, I would hope that as we're modifying the Promise Act, that we take those learnings into account and build some more accountability for us as legislators to make sure that, as Senator Nelson said, our funds are being used effectively and judiciously in order, and not being wasted or subject to fraud. It was a concern that I had during some of our COVID expenditures, and it's just been very, very hard to get any information back on that through data practices request. And so it's better for us to collect it on the front end than the back end, and encourage you to continue to look at ways we can do that.
And thank you, Senator Pratt, and we'll certainly do that together. You know, that's something, one of the reasons why we wanted to have this presentation and to hear from Ms. Dossman and the others, so that we can have a bird's eye view as to what's happening, which is why we have our partners here today. Were you going to say something, Ms. Dossman?
Thank you, Senator Champion. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, NDC's been around, like I said, for 30 years, and we have collected a lot of data on our entrepreneurs, and we know how they use those funds. So I want you to rest assured that we are being good stewards of this money, and we have opened it up. If anybody wants to come to our office at any point, see anything, do anything, you're welcome to do it. I think the biggest thing is that this money from the entrepreneurs that we've had the opportunity to speak to has been life-changing for them, to be able to keep their businesses running in spite of, and to be seen, because these entrepreneurs, to be honest with you, were left behind. And a lot of them did not have access to the dollars. And so this is a huge, this is a big deal for them. And so I just feel grateful that we have this opportunity. The $65 million is going to go out. We're not going to open the floodgates right away. We're going to do it, continue to do it in batches and in waves. But I'm not leaving a penny on the table. I mean, we have to get it out. They need it.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a few questions. I hope that you can be a little patient with me. My first question is, I think last year we talked a little bit about, which was an issue that was important to me, diversity within your staff, in your organization. Has that happened, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Ms. Dossman.
I don't recall talking about that. Is our staff diverse, is what? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Mohammed.
I guess I mean in terms of within your staff, you do work with diverse groups and businesses.
Sorry.
People who speak multiple languages.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Dossman.
Senator Dossman, yeah. Yes, yes, Senator Mohammed. Yes, we work, NDC historically has worked across all neighborhoods. We helped, start AEDC, LEDC, Neon. That's been our history for over 30 years. This program actually was able to reach, even though it's not specifically called out that it was for any particular demographic. It reached over 80% people of color for this program because we focused on these low to low income neighborhoods. So yes, very diverse. And that's also why, to be honest with you, Senator Mohammed, that we wanted to use the community partners to make sure that we could go deeper into these neighborhoods with people that they trusted. NDC isn't everywhere at all times. We're not that arrogant, but we know that we need to do this in partnership with others to make sure that we reach people with their language in their neighborhoods.
Follow-up, Senator Mohammed?
That's helpful. I think my question was like, did you hire staff within your organization?
Oh,
Ms. Dossman?
That's okay.
sorry. Yes, very diverse. You can see behind me, that's our team back there, very diverse, yes.
Okay.
And we hired people too that were from those communities and from those neighborhoods. So yes, NDC is a very diverse organization.
Senator Mohammed?
That's helpful. Thank you for the work you're doing. And then my other question is, you talked a little bit about phase one and sort of some of the successes and the challenges. The first question is, how much money has actually gone out the door so far? And
Ms. Dossman?
It was over $7 million that went out, 7.34 to be exact.
Senator Mohammed?
we have about 65 million?
Yeah,
Left.
65.
Left? Okay. And then my other question is, in terms of phase two, you talked a little bit about not everything was perfect. You guys are doing your best. You want to meet the moment. Can you talk about what you'll do differently within your organization to make sure that this money gets out in time?
Ms. Dossman?
Yeah, I kind of highlighted a couple of those things, and if you can go to the learnings page. I mean, I think the main thing that we realized is that, first of all, we need to do the technical assistance piece. We need to do that upstream because it was bogging the system down trying to do technical assistance. We had 80% of the applicants need help. They needed help with understanding how to input the things into the application, understanding their financials. So we needed to do that, and we need to do more in person. So now we have more sessions set up within those communities in the different languages, et cetera, to give them more one-on-one help. We also recognized that our communication we needed better communication. And the system that we were using was not efficient to provide the communication that the entrepreneurs might need. So we've now added a new system that does that. They need real-time updates. So we have a system now that gives them real-time updates on their applications and SMS. And then also we're doing the in-person workshops for taxes. And all of our programs now are focused on financial literacy and getting entrepreneurs ready. I think we knew instinctively that that was an opportunity, but we had no idea to the degree. So those are some of the things that we're doing now to move this forward.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's really helpful. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I think, this funding was passed out of a need for communities who have historically been left behind, and I think you serve an important role in that. Within the communities that we do serve, we always hear about what's happening. I think for me, there's been a gap between your organization and how folks can sort of understand when they're applying for application, what the requirements are, what they're going through, and I think that's a gap that I hear that's missing within those small businesses. I hope that within phase two, we can get this money out the door. I think in this committee, we often talked about, you created, Mr. Chair, the Promise Act because our agencies often don't show up for our communities that they should. And I think for me, it's a little disappointing that there's $65 million still sitting around and we have not gotten it out the door. And it's the same issue that we have within our own agencies. And I'm not putting that on you, but I think it's something that we have to figure out how we're going to deal with.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. And I think what was helpful was earlier, she sort of talked about the timeline and where there was pauses and why there needed to be pauses in order to make sure that they were getting all the information, and so that is also available in that packet. Any other questions for this testifier before we go to MEDA? And Ms. Dossman, and to your staff, thank you for your hard work on this, and we'll continue to have conversation about what improvements can be made, because I believe my motto is there's always room for improvement. Like whatever we can do in order to make it better, that's what we want to do. So thank you so very much. And I know there's some information that you and Senator Nelson are going to talk about. And if you can just follow back up with Senator Mohammed as well, just to make sure that she has all the information she needs. And I understand that you've already been talking to Senator Herr already. So thank you for that. With that being said, thank you so very much. We are now go to MEDA. And in fact, we'll go to Adrian Ruddock. Come forward, if you will. Adrian is the Vice President of Lending for MEDA. And so when you get an opportunity, state your name for the record, and then go forward with your overview. Mr. Ruddock.
Thank you, Senator Champion and distinguished members of the Senate. I am Adrian Ruddock, and I am Vice President of Lending for MEDA. I don't know if you have a copy of our document here or not.
If you hold up the one that you have, okay, let's see. Members, is the one that says MEDA on it. Do we all have it? Okay, thank you so very much. We do have it.
Well, thank you. I'll be referencing the document and pages as I go forward. And then Dorothy Bridges, who is our CEO and who is usually one who's addressing you, apologizes for not being here today. She's ill, and so she asked me to give an update for you.
And will you be so kind as to let Dorothy know that we missed her today?
Thank you very much. I'll just start with an overview again for the record that MEDA is a 53-year-old organization, and we serve underserved entrepreneurs, trying to provide them with the kind of three buckets that you see on there: capital, which is from our lending standpoint, lines of credit, commercial real estate products; SBA, consulting from our business consulting group, market analysis, and helping those entrepreneurs be prepared to scale; and then connections from our Ascend program and a few others that really deals with, again, helping those entrepreneurs to scale, create jobs, and for the greater economic development of our communities. Again, we are a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution, and most of our clients are individuals who have gone to the bank and cannot get funding and then come to us, and we are able to assist them in that way. From the Promise Act, and this is the second page that we're on, I would like to kind of really talk a little bit about from the lending standpoint. Our organization mostly does business loans. We've done commercial real estate, and thankfully Senator Champion came to us and said, this is an important aspect of the community. Can we not only assist? And so we started 6 months of preparation, community meetings, and then we launched on January 1st, and we were shell-shocked. That's the only way I can explain it. We had a number, over 1,000 applications within the first month, and then as we are going through, our entire lending team pivoted to assist in this program, and from that standpoint. And from that page, it just gives an overview of the amounts of applications that we had during the year, over 1,800, and it's broken down across the ethnic and aspect of the applicants. Now, the Promise Act, this is the commercial real estate loan program, and by statutes designated by this body, is from a geographical standpoint. The businesses have to have revenues under $1 million, and the use is the 2021 to 2022 tax returns. As you see from the eligibility, those who applied, 638 kind of really had those things. And then as we move to the eligibility aspect of that, at 34%, and then from there, as you move your way down, those who you can apply, but you didn't complete the entire application, you had some issues. We kind of brought in our entire business consulting team to assist in this aspect to get clients ready. And then overall, 148 kind of really made it to what we consider to be underwriting. On the next page, please. And so that's a breakdown of the geographical areas of the applications. As you see across the board from 38th in Chicago all the way until Shelby here, these are the numbers of applicants that came in from that standpoint, and those eligible applications by ethnicity. So we do a lot of tracking internally at MEDA. We have been doing that consistently across of all programs, including Promise Act. Next place, please. It says Promise Act, number of applicants submitted from there. And then, I'll go over to the next one. I'm on this page, the document with the pie chart. Non-eligible reasons for the applicants. As you can see, over 929 of those individuals were not in the Promise Act zone, so we couldn't help them. And a lot of them were looking for working capital, and so we were able to pivot them to other programs that we had that worked on working capital. The next segment was 259 of them were not had enough years in business, so they didn't qualify from that aspect. And we were able to route them to other programs. And then the third one, and that was the one that we had some issues with and continue to work with, the revenues were too high for the Promise Act. It had to be under $1 million. And so that was, again, another reason for us to really work with those. On the other side, on the next page, we have a number of kind of case studies that we've done. I'll highlight a couple of them just to talk about them because I think they're really, really relevant to how the Promise Act funding has been helpful. The first one is Udo's African Restaurant, and here's Officer Snelling here. The family, Udo family, has been an incredible group of individuals. He started his business 13 years ago, was in a small space, was turned down by 5 different banks as he was trying to expand his space. The Promise Act allowed him to move into another location and to expand in this physical space of adding the grocery store and the restaurant. And he will be creating 10 jobs from that aspect of it. The next group is Sunshine Group Home. This was a gentleman who had a group home that, again, great. And by the way, we do a site visit on all of these, and one of the site visit members. So we are able to speak about from this perspective. He couldn't find the additional financing he owned the space, but he couldn't have the financing to fix up the space, couldn't get the funding. And so we were able to help him kind of really purchase the building now and fix up the space, and he'll be adding 2 jobs from there. El Pollo Feliz is a deal that we worked together. This was in partnership with LEDC. This was a restaurant. Again, they were on a land contract, and so LEDC and us came together and kind of work with them, and they were able to purchase the property. Now, instead of paying like almost $5,000 a month in rent, the rent has been lowered now to $3,800. So they're saving about $1,200 a month and being able to put those funding back into their pockets and actually into the business so they can expand. And I think you have a number of other case studies. I don't have to go through all of them. If you want me to, I'm happy to expand. But again, we want to say that we're in partnership with this body in getting the dollars out. The pipeline is rich. We have about $14 million in deals, about 13.9. And then as we continue, we have about 6 more of those deals and adding each time. Our expansion opportunities, meeting with Eastside Funding Group. We have a number of other places that we are expanding in the St. Paul, North Minneapolis, East Lake Street, and continuing from there. So if you have questions or other aspects for me, I'm happy to answer. And thank you again for your partnership.
Mr. Rudder, thank you for the presentation, thank you for the information. Can you give us a sense of, if you were to advise us as to what changes we should make that would make, bring about more success? What would that information be?
Yes, I can tell you off the top of my head. We have a number of situations where we have clients that come to us and they're just above the $1 million mark. They're not wealthy, they're just doing well, and they're just doing enough, and they've just crossed over the 1.1 million. And so we have 44 deals between 1 million and 1.5, and we would love to do those deals and be able to. Unfortunately, in the current structure, we are unable to do that. The second group would be individuals who, again, don't have the capacity to go to a bank, and so they're online contracts. And so I won't say to the individuals, so if you're on a land contract, you're on a seller financing arrangement with the landlord, and you're just paying them informally. And those deals are, again, difficult because the buildings are in shape. You don't have to do anything. And a lot of the clients are just taking it because they want to own the building. And so if we can get those deals into a bankable situation, that would be great. The other one now that would be really important, we have a lot of clients who are in situations when they tried to buy the building. Again, they're on land contracts, a different one, but now they're paying 12, 13% interest. And then under the current program, we can refinance that down to 3% or take that out into ours. So again, another about 50 deals that we can't do are under those three structures, and we would love to help those clients.
Any other questions for Mr. Rudder? Anyone? Senator Nelson?
Yes.
Well, first, thank you for the great presentation, very helpful. I'm interested in your last comment, though. Obviously, one of the challenges of buying instead of renting, of course, is that interest rate. And you mentioned that, I thought I heard you say that working with MEDA, rather than paying the 12 to 13% interest rate to purchase a property, they were able, you somehow during MEDA, with MEDA, you were able to get that down to 3 or 4%. And if I understood that correctly, how do you do that?
No.
Mr. Rudder?
What I meant to say that, so the individual who's on we call a seller financing land contract, the landlord is charging 13%. And so under the current Promise Act, we would like to refinance. It's not an issue of refinance. We would just want to change the financing to the Promise Act. It would change that from literally 13% down to 3%. The difference in capital costs for them, for the clients, would be huge. And so we really want to do those things. We do a lot of seller financing contracts, renewal all the time, and it just opens up capacity for the business to put the money into hiring more employees, getting new equipment. If you're paying 13% for your finance costs just to own the building, you don't have anything left over to down payment on a house, a whole different things, paying down the credit cards that you're using for your business, that from your personal side, and a whole host of other things that would help the business itself grow and to do what we all want to do, create more jobs and everything else. So that's why we are asking and suggesting the refinance or that aspect from the seller financing contracts down to the Promise Act funding.
Any other follow-up? Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So definitely understand the value in not paying that money in interest, for sure. And so I definitely understand why it's important to refinance. What is the mechanism in the Promise Act that would allow that 13% finance charge to be brought down to a 3 or 4% finance charge?
So one of the things I think he's saying is that if someone is in an existing loan, and especially if the interest rate was 12 to 13%, the Promise Act does not allow our funds to be used to refinance that loan, that would get that loan down to 3%.
Correct.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair?
Senator Nelson?
Yes, and so this is your one of your suggestions then, that the Promise Act, that projects be eligible for refinancing through the Promise Act, is what I'm hearing. Is that
Mr. Reddick?
correct?
Yes,
Thank you. I just needed some clarity on that. Thank
no
you.
problem.
Clarity is good for the soul. So thank you so much, and thank you for your questions, Senator Nelson. Those are great questions. Any other questions for Mr. Ruddick? Seeing none, thank you so, Senator Mohammed, I'm sorry.
I can't help myself. Thank you,
It's
Mr.
okay.
Chair. Can you tell me what has been the biggest hurdle in terms of you getting the money out the door? And do you feel like you guys have had, as an organization, the funding to be able to, the operations dollars in order to get the money out the door?
Mr. Ruddick?
A couple of things. The first part would be that the biggest challenge that we find that clients that we think they apply, they have good aspects, and then we get deeper into the financials, tax returns, and everything else, and we find that we're literally extending our underwriting to twice a month because we're doing a lot of technical assistance to assist them to get to that point. So that's a big aspect of that, so much so that we have to bring in our business consulting division to assist those clients to get that through. So yes, we could use more funding for our technical assistance aspect of it underneath the Promise Act. We could use funding in addition to assist those clients now to be prepared to underwrite. Our processes on normal and on regular banking would be 60 days to get a loan underwritten. We're seeing twice as much, about 4 to 4.5 months in that process.
And one of the things I think he said earlier, Senator Mohammed, was some of the challenges that I believe that he said earlier was when they had a number of applications, over 1,800 applications, at least 638 of those were not eligible due to either geography, under $1 million revenue because they make a little more, could be $1 over, and they would
Yes.
be ineligible because of the cap that we put. And then also 2021 and 2022 tax returns, because then you're cutting out people who may have started their business a little later, but also needing that
Yep.
interest. Senator Mohammed.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And those are issues that obviously are going to come up no matter what phase you are in within the project. How much money did you guys get in terms of technical assistance? Because I think that's where we can help in making sure that these organizations are able to be successful to get the money out the door.
And Mr. Ruddick, there are two components to this, because I think you guys got a separate line for TA, and
Yes.
there are some dollars available under the Promise Act. So to her question.
Sure. From the kind of front end part of the Promise Act, we had like about $2.5 million for technical assistance. And then through another aspect of deed, we had about $2 million there. So about, I would say, 2.5, 3 million overall. We quickly realized that our resources, we took up the entire lending and business consulting teams to kind of get these done. And so that adjustment would be suggested as we continue to talk through that.
Any other questions? Senator Mohammed, you good? Any other questions for Mr. Ruddick before we go on to the Minnesota Initiative Foundation? And I'm excited to hear from them. There's 6 of them, so you know they came loaded to bear, let me just say. Any other questions? Seeing them, Mr. Ruddick, thank you for being here. Thank you for the information. And if you think of any additional suggestions for us as we're wrestling through this whole thing about the Promise Act, please feel free to send that information to Mr. Melton here, who is our committee administrator, or Taylor Tidwell Bennett over there. So thank you so very much for being here.
And thank you, Senator Champion and Raleigh, for having me. Thank you.
All right, we are now going to the Minnesota Initiative Foundations, as you all know, and we'll have, and I think, I'll just read them from the order I see here. Let's see, we have some that are virtual, oh, they're all virtual, okay. Who is here? Okay, Zach Tabbitt, if you'll come to the table, since you're here in person, maybe we will start with you. But just so everyone knows about the Minnesota Initiative Foundation, we wanted to make sure that there was support throughout the state, and it's my understanding there should be 6 initiative foundations, and so each one is going to present and tell us what they did from their vantage point and provide any suggestions that would be helpful to this committee. So with that being said, Mr. Zach Tabbitt, and I hope I said your last name correctly. If not, please correct me. Identify yourself for the record and give us your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Senators. I'm Zach Tabbitt, Vice President for Economic Opportunity at the Initiative Foundation, serving the 14 counties and 2 Native nations located in central Minnesota. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. An overview of our grants program, and understanding there's 5 more behind me, I'm going to try to run through quickly and offer the suggestions for the group immediately at the end of my commentary. We received 661 total grant applications and found 606 of those to be eligible. We made 46 grants for a total dollar value of $1,150,000 in the first round. We expect to repeat roughly that amount this summer here over the June, July, August time period to close out the program. A couple of quick grant examples from the first round are that we had an art and design shop in Delano who received a $10,000 grant. That owner emailed us to thank the foundation and the state for the support that she received and commented that it allowed her business to thrive in today's challenging economy. We had another startup housing developer in the small town of Clarissa that received a $10,000 grant. And I can say from firsthand experience, I've walked through one of her projects that actually is in Long Prairie. She's adding apartments, redoing dilapidated buildings, and really helping downtown main streets in small towns thrive while adding new needed housing in rural Minnesota. An overview of our loans so far. As a community development financial institution and a lender serving a broad rural area, this funding pool is one of several that we are deploying, each of which has its own requirements, restrictions, and goals. So far, we have made a total of $386,000 in loans through five different loans that we have made. One example of them is that we had a small business dental arts studio that supports dentistry offices who wanted to own the small business that she had, the location she was leasing. So she was able to use a $90,000 promise loan to help her purchase the building that she now owns as an owner-occupied business in a small town. That's a quick overview of our results so far, and wanted to speak for the network of initiative foundations regarding particularly some tweaks that we would offer that we think would enhance the long-term impact of the loan portion of the program. Currently, repaid loan funds are required to comply with the original statute in perpetuity for lending eligibility, and that means looking back at the 2021 tax return forever after these are revolved. So that will become increasingly difficult and ultimately impossible in the future. So our suggestion would be that if we could release the restrictions so that once the original loans are revolved back to the lenders, if they could be moved into a general small business lending pool, we believe we could then efficiently deploy and redeploy those dollars for decades to come within our standard small business lending programs that we've all been doing for years. A couple of eligibility requirements that have also been challenging are the $1 million gross revenue cap that's been noted by other speakers today. It has eliminated a couple of good projects for us. An example that we had recently was that we had a small optometry office in a small town, one doctor, 4 or 5 staff members that wanted to add space for another doctor to come in. And they were just over that cap. And as you are all likely aware, it's just very expensive to have even a handful of staff and to maintain a building nowadays. So we believe that a $2 million cap would accomplish the goals of the program, but allow us to serve a larger group of small businesses. Another quick tweak that we would offer is that many of our clients are looking to improve their equipment in their facilities, and often those are large and expensive items. Those are not clearly allowed within the current program. And we believe that a broader definition of fixed assets within the statute would allow more local small businesses to benefit from that. And the final tweak that we would offer up is that currently the term for the loans is capped at a 10-year term. And for real estate purposes in particular, it would allow for lower payments over time to keep better cash flow in these small businesses if we could extend that to a 20-year repayment term for the loan program. Overall, the loan program and the grants program have been excellent for small businesses in our region. And I think with these small tweaks, we would see some high-quality impact for years to come through the program. Those are my comments for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
No, thank you for being here. We sincerely appreciate it, especially in this weather. So thank you for being a trooper, for lack of a better word. Any other questions for Mr. Tabbitt? Anyone? Seeing none, thank you so much. I don't know if you want to sit there or in the audience while we take a couple that are virtual, just in case you want to chime in on anything. You could certainly.
I can stay here, sir.
Let us know.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now go to Sarah Linda. Sarah Linda, it's so good to see you. She's with the Community Revitalization Senior Program Manager, Northwest Minnesota Foundation. If you can provide us your testimony. Welcome to the committee and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Linda. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Community Revitalization at the Northwest Minnesota Foundation. The Northwest Minnesota Foundation is located in the northwest corner of the state. We serve 2 tribal nations and 12 counties. We are a very rural region, so our experience with both the grants and the loans have been slightly different than our friends and partners to the south of us. As far as the Promise Act grant program, we received a total of 287 applications in our first round. We are gearing up to open the second round, hopefully soon this spring, with wrapping that up by July or August. As far as our first round eligibility information, we found 153 of those total applications to be fully eligible. The remainder were identified as ineligible for a variety of reasons, including several duplicate applications as people tried to get from phase 1 to phase 2, failure to submit accurate information, applications from outside our geography, about a dozen of those. Some applications were simply not meeting the basic eligibility criteria, such as gross revenues. We made a total of 50 grants for $1.145 million. One of the grants went to a private outdoor nature school, and the owner of that school used some of the funds to pay off yurts that she had purchased, where she conducts classroom activities in a beautiful outdoor garden space, and she has heated those yurts and does her class time inside the yurts. It was very cool to help her pay those off. Our loan program, and I'll echo what Mr. Tabbitt said, this is one of many loan programs that the Northwest Minnesota Foundation operates. So far, we've made one loan of $150,000 under the Promise Act loan program. And this funding went to a rural business helping to finance the construction of an insulated pole barn where they will be processing and packaging grains for online sales. We do have several other inquiries that we believe will be an appropriate fit for the Promise Act loan dollars. And as our loans come in, we vet each loan thoroughly to decide which program to run it through. And being that the Promise Act loan programs are restricted generally to real estate, it helps us identify those projects very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Sarah Linda? Seeing none, thank you so much. We'll now go to Tony Sertich, President and CEO of Northland Foundation. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Tony Surich, and I'm the president and CEO of the North End Foundation. We serve the 7 counties and 5 tribal nations in northeastern Minnesota, and really appreciate both this opportunity to testify, and especially on a weather day like today remotely, and appreciate the opportunity to partner with you all in the legislature and our friends Indeed to do this work. And as the Minnesota Initiative Foundations, we're all independent of each other, but collectively serve all of greater Minnesota. And so we each have a little bit of a different take on how we do this work, but we collectively work well. And so much of my testimony will mirror Sarah's testimony. From the grant side of things at North End Foundation, we received 211 applications. 80% of them were deemed eligible, 20% ineligible, primarily for the same reasons that Sarah stated. We were able to only fund 20% of the applications, and they came from that tier 1, the smallest businesses. We were able to fund all of those smallest businesses, and then we actually used a lottery system for the remaining dollars because we felt that that was the fairest way to distribute the rest of the funds. But over 60% of the eligible applications we had to deny because we did not have enough funding. And we received a similar amount to Northwest of $1.1 million. And so, and they went to a variety of types of businesses across all of our vast rural region. On the loan side of things, similar, we have a number of different loan fund opportunities in our portfolio, and what our loan officers try to do is to work with our existing rural businesses to see which loan product makes the most sense to them and which they can best qualify for. And so thus far, we've been able to make 3 loans out of the loan program for a total of $228,000 in 3 different communities in northeastern Minnesota, 1 in Hibbing, 1 in Duluth, and 1 in Grand Rapids. And so we appreciate this opportunity. I just want to touch on 2 last things before I stand to answer any questions. And the first is we have provided Chair Champion with some suggestions for potential improvements or changes we'd like to see, and I'd reserve any of that to our colleague from the Initiative Foundation, who is, I think, physically in the audience to talk more about collectively what we've been focused on. And the second piece around collecting data around impact is we certainly have done some of that, but if there's more to be done, we would, I think, humbly ask for making sure that we have the administrative capacity to do that and finances to do that. We're doing this for about 4% administrative funds, and we generally, as independent partners with the state and with DEED in this, we look, and when we do this work, it's generally for closer to 10% or more. And so if you're asking us to do more work on the back end, we would appreciate being compensated for that work, because some of this, not just the data collection piece, but around making sure folks are eligible, it's very hand-to-hand and very time-intensive work to make sure that folks qualify, and we're being good stewards of the dollars to make sure there is no fraud, waste, or abuse in running these programs. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Open to any questions or handing it off to my next colleague.
And that is true. Thank you for your testimony. It's true that the Minnesota Initiative Foundation's group has had some conversation with me, and we had a chance to have a robust discussion about what things could be modified in order to enhance the program. Any questions for Mr. Surdich from anyone on the committee? Well, thank you so very much. We will now go to Greg Wagner, who's the Director of Business and Economic Development, West Central Initiative.
Thank you, Chair Champion, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Greg Wagner, Director of Business and Economic Development with West Central Initiative. West Central Initiative is by name located in the west central portion of the state. We serve 1 Native nation and the 9 counties within our region, and very, very similar structured to the sister foundations that are here today. Related to the Promise Act grant program, West Central received 451 applications. We were able to fund 52 of those requests. We had 173 applications that met the highest priority tier of the program. That equated to $3.5 million in requests, and we were able to distribute that $1.15 million allocation that we had received in full. Our numbers align similarly to the foundations that I've already spoke with you today. So we had about 20% applications that were deemed ineligible for a litany of reasons, too big, too small, not in business long enough, and we did have some fabricated applications. One story I would like to highlight, kind of on the on-the-ground impact, is we had a very, very small manufacturer that didn't even have a website presence, and so as part of our due diligence in trying to ensure that this was an actual operating business, through some Google searches, found that there was a liquidation auction scheduled on their equipment. So I had a conversation with the owner to just confirm that they are still actually open and operating, and what was disclosed to me was that the bank was requiring them to start working to liquidate to cover their outstanding debts, and this program really swooped in at the last minute, and they were able to make themselves whole and keep their doors open as a very small manufacturer in a very small rural community. So related to the Promise Act loan program, West Central Initiative, again, is structured like the other foundations today. We have several other loan programs, and we get an application and find the best fit. We have not distributed any dollars outside or out of the Promise Act loan program. One primary reason for that is I wanted to make sure we were done and wrapped up with the first round of the grant program before we launched the loan program. So we launched that later this fall, and so obviously kind of this winter time is not a big construction period. We did have one request that we really tried to fit into the loan program. The interest rate of 3% was very beneficial to them. It's a small cooperatively owned grocery store that has been doing well enough where they need to expand their space. So they have some construction and renovation costs, but the 10-year loan term impacted cash flow greatly enough that it just made sense to approve them under a different loan program so we could offer them a 20-year term. And so really happy to answer any questions. Thank you for the opportunity for the testimony today and your time.
Any questions for Mr. Wagner from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so very much. We'll go to our last presenter for the Minnesota Initiative Foundation, and that would be Scott Marquardt, who's the president of the Southwest Initiative Foundation. Welcome to the committee, and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Marquardt of Southwest Initiative Foundation. We serve the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota, Upper Sioux community, and Lower Sioux community. I would just like to start with a brief expression of gratitude to your committee, Mr. Chair, and to the Department of Employment and Economic Development for the nearly 40 years of relationship and investment into our initiative foundations and into our communities, large and small, from corner to corner. You're a big part of our narrative, and I'm beyond grateful, and our recipients are very grateful too. For us, our numbers on the Promise Act grants mirror many of our colleagues. We had 292 total applications, 13% deemed ineligible. As a percentage of raw applications, 14% were awarded, and as a percentage of cash, 17%. So similar spreads there in approval, non-approval, and showing the significant demand for it. From a capital perspective, in this post-pandemic world, we are experiencing unprecedented demand for economic development capital in our region, and I think that mirrors a lot of places. So that just shows the importance of these programs. Skipping right to the loans for a moment, I would like to just amplify a couple of the points, Mr. Chair, that have been shared regarding potential opportunities to enhance the program. As we saw with Main Street Economic Revitalization, which again, we're grateful for and is having a huge impact throughout our region too, a more expansive definition of fixed asset or capital improvement would be important, not to blur lines with what would be working capital or inventory, but just these essential equipment investments that are needed in our smallest businesses. And then I'd also like to amplify the importance of the opportunity to increase term, or to think of it through the lens of even allowing perhaps a 10-year balloon payment, but longer amortizations with these real estate deals. In my time at the Initiative Foundation world, one of our most powerful tools that we can complement private lenders and public lenders is that cash flow maximization through longer amortization. So if there is something that could be done there, I am more than confident that this will amplify the impact and the legislative intent of this, and really deliver a lot of ROI to the taxpayers. So again, I'd like to close with the gratitude. We've received a number of thank you notes, just beautifully written expressions from our promised grantees showing how important this is. And thank you for your time and the chance to share those words.
Thank you so very much. Any questions for Mr. Marcotte? Seeing none, we do have one more. That'd be Brian Conzemus.
Conzemius, yep.
There we go. Thank you so very much. I like when I get corrected. That helps me out immensely.
Thank you, Chair and Senator. I'm Brian Conzemius. I'm the CFO for the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. We serve 20 counties in southeast and south central Minnesota, including Rochester and Mankato. Similar programs to the other initiative foundations and what we do, focusing on early childhood, economic development, and community initiatives. On the grant side of things, we received 815 applications. We were able to give out 45 grants. Of that, about a third were not qualified based on revenue or in business new. So far in the grant program, actually on the second round, we've already received 100 inquiries in the past 2 months, and we haven't even listed publication on the second grant round. We're hoping to get that going in the next couple of weeks. So there's still a lot of interest on the grant side of things. On the lending side of things, for the Promise Act loan, we've done 2 loans, gotten out $400,000 on the loan side of things. I echo all the suggestions from the other team members about the lending program. We did 1 loan to a small town in Elgin for an RV repair shop. They were able to go from mobile to a physical location and increase their employment within that. So I just want to thank committee members for the opportunity and the trust within the Initiative Foundation, and thank you for all that you guys do.
Any questions for Mr. Conzemus? Seeing none, I know that, Mr. Tabbitt, is there anything else that you want us to know, or do you feel like all your partners also echoed your sentiments? Is there anything else that you want us to know briefly?
I believe it was well covered. I want to thank you again for the time today, and thank you for the program. This has been very helpful for our rural Minnesota areas.
Thank you so very much. And with that, we appreciate you all and your work that you are doing, and we look forward to having continued conversation with you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Members, next, we will have my bill, Senate File Number 1832. So if I can get the commissioner to join me at the testifiers table, and we will have Senator Gustafson, who's going to take over the chair. So it's good to see her as usual.
That side of the table's empty now. You want me to have him state his name? Thanks, sir.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Champion.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, before the committee is Senate File Number 1832. This is Deed's budget bill for fiscal year 26 and 27 biennium. And what you'll see is that this budget bill takes a targeted approach to Minnesota's challenges in light of the state's budget picture. In particular, it makes key investments to address one of Minnesota's biggest economic challenges, the workforce shortage. And so investments in workforce development in this bill prepare workers for high-demand careers and industry sectors that pay family-sustaining wages while also addressing businesses' hiring needs. So with that being said, we are now going to go to one who is capable of talking about this bill and the importance of it, and that would be Commissioner Verlick.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Champion. My name is Matt Verlick, and I serve as Commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I'm accompanied by our Director of Government Relations, Devin Bowdry, and several other colleagues who are in the audience and available to answer questions as they may arise. And
Thank you. I'm sorry. Continue.
very good. Thanks. So I'll go to the presentation that Chair Champion queued up for us. But first, wanted to just mention that I have been in the audience for all of the presentations you just heard on the Promise Act, and want to echo the appreciation to the committee and to Chair Champion for your leadership in establishing this, and also to the partners who are doing the work, including Senator Dossman and the gang at NDC. She's not going to like that we did that, but and the folks at MEDA, and of course all the initiative foundations. And I have a special appreciation for their work because, for disclosure and transparency, as you might know, I was previously at the Initiative Foundation in Little Falls, and so have seen some of this work from the other side. And so it's a lot. It's very intricate, and everyone is aware of the spotlight, as Renee said. And so everyone's working hard to get it right and also get it done as fast as can be done for sake of impact. So appreciate all that, and it's something that we are honored to be part of at the department. Moving on now to the governor's recommendations for budgetary changes in relation to our department, Employment and Economic Development. We'll start out with an overview of what is in the proposal. First, a reminder, and I know this committee knows it well, but with everything, we are guided by our mission to empower the growth of the Minnesota economy for everyone. And in this instance, as Senator Champion mentioned, a special emphasis on workforce development, but also business development, workforce services, and beyond. As you've heard from the governor and officials at MMB, et cetera, on the whole, in light of the budget forecast, the budget proposal the governor has put out is restrained and responsible, recognizing the moment we're in, while also protecting, ideally, key investments that have been made so that we can maintain our economic progress going forward. And so when I say restrained and responsible, you can see that in the total dollar figures we're talking about. I looked at some of the previous hearings when predecessors of mine have been here, and the numbers were different in those days. But here, if you look at the general fund ask, of course, these are just the changes relative to what's already in the base for the coming biennium. But you can see we're talking about a net increase of 1.4 million in 26 and 2.235 million in 27. So pretty limited. And then in the farther out years, a net savings of 265,000. And then on the workforce development fund side, those increases of 8 million in both years of 26 and 27 relate to just one program that we'll talk about, and then zeros in the out years. So, restrained overall, not a lot of new programs, but one new program that we and the governor are proposing is an exciting one and relates very closely to our workforce development aims. That is, the governor recommends $3 million per year in 26 and 27, and then $500 per year in the out years for something called Service to Success Initiative. And we have actually 3 slides on this. In the rest of this slide, you can see the breakdown of how that money would work. And then in the subsequent ones, we'll explain a little bit more about what this actually is. But you can see the breakdown is $600,000 to establish an office in our department to lead this effort in partnership with MDE. Also $150,000 for interagency workforce alignment to facilitate additional collaboration with MDE, DHS, and other agencies that have workforce development resources, because, as I've said before, as proud as we are to be the state's primary economic and workforce development agency, many of our sister agencies also have significant resources in this space, and we all want to be rowing in the same direction, in a direction that you all share as much as we can. And then finally, $2.25 million for grants to expand recruitment, retention, and completion opportunities for public service participants. It's really all about, and we'll get into this in the next slide, but it's all about connecting folks involved in public service fellowships and so forth to the career opportunities and employment needs of our businesses. So to elaborate just a little bit, we have every year thousands of public service opportunities. You can think, first of all, about when folks are finishing high school, for example, you have an opportunity to serve the public in the military. But when it comes to civilian opportunities, we look at things like AmeriCorps. And in fact, at the Initiative Foundation, where I used to be, we were an AmeriCorps Vista host site. So that's just one example of places that publicly minded individuals can go. But the wide variety of programs and positions that exist lack a certain amount of coordination and awareness. And so then it's up to each kind of host site really to do a lot of the promotion of the opportunity and to recruit people for those opportunities. And I can tell you from past experience that it can be challenging. In addition, there's a lack of career pathways for individuals after the fact. And so once you have done something publicly minded and probably didn't necessarily earn a market wage while you were doing it, then when you're exiting and hoping to find something that meets your own needs and also meets the needs of employers, there aren't necessarily a lot of resources for that. We also see a somewhat lack of overall state strategy for state investments across agencies into those public service programs, and a lack of alignment with education and workforce development initiatives in key areas of focus, such as the Drive for Five, which we'll talk about later. So the Office of Public Service to be established would support the development of career pathways for individuals leaving those public service programs into relevant careers, develop an overarching strategy for those state investments across public service programs, and coordinate across agencies how best to use public service, and to align education and workforce development initiatives for areas of focus like healthcare, education, et cetera. So we gave you that breakdown of the dollar figures. So part of it, again, is to establish the office with Indeed and in partnership with MDE. Next, the interagency workforce alignment piece. And then finally, the grants piece, which is the biggest one of $2.25 million. That is to make grants to some of the individual service opportunity organizations, partly so that they can, I think, increase the attractiveness of those service opportunities to the young people who are pondering whether to go that direction or perhaps a more financially favorable option that they may have. Moving on to other proposals, we have the Drive for Five Workforce Initiative. As I mentioned, the governor recommends $8 million annually for FY26 and 27. I think the base on this one is at zero, if I'm not mistaken. And so this would allow this highly impactful program to continue. As a reminder, the Drive for Five was new in the 2023 session, and it focuses workforce development efforts on addressing the needs in 5 key sectors that have high demand and offer family-sustaining wages, and they are listed in the slide. As you can see, technology, caring professions, trades. We're using slightly different names here in the slides, manufacturing, and then education. And we have had, I think, a good success with the grants that have been deployed so far. Just last night had dinner with the St. Paul Chamber, which was a grantee, and is very enthusiastic about what they've been able to do with it. Also, the Drive for Five, in addition to just being a grant program at DEED that focuses us in a certain way, it's also kind of the unifying theme for other state agencies that are also doing their workforce development work. And so it's part of that interagency coordination and getting us rowing in the right direction. And so we're pleased with what has been done so far. There's actually a lot more to be done with the 2023 funds, and this would enable us to keep going with $4.5 million for competitive grants for workforce development organizations. Secondly, competitive grants for trade associations, including chambers, for job placement. The program is also out of the ordinary in that amongst all of our workforce development programs, I don't think any of the others do allow for chambers and trade associations to participate. This one does, and so that gives us more reach. And of course, the eligible entities really are excited about it as well, because they are in very close touch with the businesses in their communities. And then finally, our employer engagement team, which is DEED staff who provide additional assistance when employers in those key sectors are doing an expansion and then need extra assistance to make sure they can find the people to actually do the expansion. And I think I may have sort of already walked through all this already on my preceding slide, so I got a little bit ahead of myself. But for sake of time, then I'll just carry on to the next slide. The next item in the budget proposal is an operations increase of, you can see, $752,000 in 1 year and then $1.5 million in the following to address operating cost increases, such as increases in employer-paid healthcare contributions, FICA, Medicare, IT, legal services, and space, physical space. Next, hopefully you like these, we have budget neutral recommendations. First, related to the Minnesota Forward Fund, and consistent with the theme of gratitude and impact, this, as you know, was a creation of the 2023 session, again with great leadership from this committee and strong support from the governor and lieutenant governor as well, allowing Minnesota the resources, $400 million in resources, to be able to match instances where Minnesota companies were approved for federal funding, whether through the CHIPS Act or the IIJA, IRA, et cetera. And so we have been able to do some really exciting things with the funds provided in the Forward Fund, such as Polar Semiconductor and its $500 million expansion in Bloomington, Skywater, Solugen, other companies like that we'd be happy to talk about. Some funds remain in the program. Meanwhile, this was always entirely about matching, and so if there was not a federal match to be achieved, then we couldn't deploy the state funds. Well, now that the administration has changed in DC and some of those programs are winding down, the match opportunities really aren't there in the way that they were before. However, Deputy Commissioner McKinnon is with us here in the audience on the economic development side, and he would tell us that our pipeline of large expansion projects in Minnesota is still quite robust. And we've been able to do some really incredible incentives to make great projects happen, such as Solventum, such as Sofidel in Duluth, and others around the state. And so the proposal in this item is to make a couple of changes to the Forward Fund that would enable us to keep addressing some of those large project needs that are in the pipeline without them having a federal component now. And so the two basic elements would be to make the funds available until spent, and then also to remove the requirement that the funds be used as matching. And again, I think I've kind of elaborated on the rationale that follows. Next, we would go to Minnesota Job Skills Partnership modifications. This, as a reminder, is one of our great workforce development programs. Predominantly what happens here is DEED is able to make funding awards to higher education institutions that are doing training specifically on behalf of an individual company that has a training need, oftentimes associated with an expansion. We just had a meeting of this board, I think it was yesterday, and heard about a number of additional great projects. What the proposal will do is to make some changes that will increase the amount of indirect costs that the higher ed institutions are able to charge, partly because the limitations on MJSP presently make MJSP not really competitive relative to other ways that those training institutions can be deploying their resources. And so this will allow us to make better use of the program, essentially. And then we would also increase the total, the recommendation is to increase the total grant size, partly to accommodate that change that I just mentioned. Next, a sort of a reporting item change. So the governor recommends modifying the definition of a credential to allow non-post-secondary credentials. This is mainly about when we're reporting outcomes of various DEED programs, and you're looking at the column that says how many people who went through the programs got a credential. Presently, we don't count some of the modern credentials that we do recognize are highly impactful and important in this economy. But so we feel as though this change, which would include counting commercial driver's license training, coding boot camps, et cetera, would give a more accurate representation of some of the impact of DEED's workforce development programs. And also, in a way, just sort of validate and elevate the value of some of those credentials alongside other more traditional ones. Next, Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure, a change that would modify eligibility. So with BDPI, it's about providing funds to support the infrastructure owned by a municipality to assist a business, typically a business expansion. And we have a certain list of what kinds of projects are eligible. And this proposal would change the eligibility to allow for plant-based processing projects to then be supported by that infrastructure. So processing related to corn, beans, sugar beets, and more. And we know that those kinds of projects obviously do have lots of positive impacts, and this would just enable our program to better meet those needs. Next, we have an exciting set of technical corrections that I might not spend a whole lot of time on. One relates to the Expanding Opportunity Fund, just providing us the special revenue fund that's necessary for repayments. Next, related to Neighborhood Development Center, reflecting accurately legislative intent for South Minneapolis. Next, the Job Creation Fund and General Fund transfer. The language needs to be changed just to allow that transfer to happen correctly. And then a technical correction related to the Duluth Regional Exchange District, changing the word current to preceding would be more appropriate. Next, we have savings. And this relates to BDPI, which we just talked about, Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure. Over the years, this program, I think initially was funded only through bonds, and then from 2017 forward, received a mix of general funds and bonding funds. And this proposal would recommend reducing the general fund contribution to the program, resulting in savings of $4.5 million in both biennia. And then to offset that reduction, the bonding proposal would include a $2.7 million increase. And that concludes the recommended changes in the governor's budget proposal. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Members, any questions? Senator Draheim is online, so we'll go to Senator Draheim first. There he is.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the presentation. I hope you can hear me okay.
We do.
The budget that you were talking about and the increases, can you just tell the committee what the base budget is and then what your all funds budget is? Commissioner.
Commissioner, whenever you're ready.
Madam Chair, Senator, thank you. Might I turn to my colleague, Devin, on that one?
To the testifier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Devin Bowdry, Government Relations Director. Might I turn to Hannah for help?
Third time's a charm. Hannah?
Madam Chair and committee members, Senator Draheim, are you looking, your question was base budget, what that is currently, and then an all funds budget, or would you like the base budget with the governor's recommendations included as well?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just the base budget without the additions and then the all funds budget.
To the testifier.
Madam Chair and committee members, base budget for fiscal year 26-27 for employment and economic development as of the November 2024 forecast for general fund over the biennium is $213.87 million. And an all funds budget for deed, which would include, let's see, make sure I'm getting everything correct here. For deed would include, oh, there we go. Would include general fund, workforce development fund, remediation fund, climate and economic development fund, family and medical benefit insurance fund, special revenue fund, federal funds, and a bunch of other kind of smaller funds like petroleum cleanup, gift fund, and ARP fund. All of that together, I believe, is around $3.8 billion, the largest of which, or I guess, I mean, I could walk through each fund if you'd like, but that's kind of the large all fund scope of deed.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess my next question was the slide that has to do with the labor costs, if we could put that back up. The ask for an increase in labor.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
Madam Chair,
I
to me.
Sorry, to the Commissioner.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Draheim, were you referring to the very first slide that I've just got it on now, showing the totals?
No, the labor increase, I think it was like $1.5 million, Commissioner, to help offset healthcare costs and other.
Oh, the operating
expenses.
adjustment, yes.
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator, I think I've got it on the right slide now.
Yep, thank you, Chair and Commissioner. So we all know healthcare costs are going up. But would this include paid family medical leave also?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator, no, this relates just to D operations team and indirect costs, including Minute, for example.
Senator Draheim.
So the paid family medical leave isn't included in it? How is that? The cost, your half of the whatever the rate is for paid family medical leave is not built into your budget for next year, for 27, 29, next biennium?
Madam Chair, Senator, you're referring to like the employer portion of our employees being covered?
Correct.
Oh, that's a good question. I think we might have to get back to you on that.
Senator Draheim, can they follow up with you after the committee?
Of course. Thank you, Senator Gustafson, or Chair Gustafson. And then my last question has to do with the plant-based program that was proposed. And, you mentioned corn and soybeans, which are obviously really important in my district, Commissioner. But does that also include like hemp and marijuana?
Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Senator, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Draheim. Senator Pratt?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a couple of thoughts. I've had concerns with the governor's, all of the governor's budget recommendations, and this one is no different. Commissioner, you talked about BDPI. As I understand it, we are completely cutting the general fund participation in the BDPI program and simply relying on the bonding. And yet we are then turning around and as Senator Draheim pointed out here, I'm very concerned about the trend here, right? Giving a $752,000 increase to your operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year. But then as we're heading into a $5 billion deficit, you're expecting that to double on an annual basis to over 1.5 billion. And I would think that we should be expecting some efficiencies and some savings coming out of our state agencies. As the governor's pushed and shifted state funding and responsibility down to our counties, which, as I've been told, will end up being probably the largest property tax increase in state history. Shouldn't we be expecting our agencies, and how do you explain not only a $750,000 increase in operating costs this year, but more than double for an ongoing basis?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator, thank you. And you are right that we should be seeking efficiencies, and we are, and we do. And that includes related to space. It includes related to systems that we can rely on that will make our team more efficient and not spend as much time. At the same time, we're also not immune to inflationary pressures, and we sometimes have to pay other entities that themselves face inflationary pressures. And so this is what those not very negotiable options add up to in our case.
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner, we've got small businesses basically tightening the belt. We've got, as I mentioned before, we are likely to be pushing down the largest property tax increase in state history down to our residents, and Minnesota families are going to be tightening their belt. I think Minnesotans expect your agency and all other agencies to be doing a better job of tightening the belt. We all face increases. That's why we're looking for efficiencies. Those very things that you mentioned should allow us to do that. I'm fearful that a lot of this cost, as Senator Draheim was indicating, is going to support the paid family medical leave program, which could have been implemented in a, I had an option that would have been a much less of an obligation by the state and more of a public-private partnership, but we decided to go with a full state model. Madam Chair, I'm also concerned about, and this is going to be kind of a technical, nerdy thing, in Article 2, and I believe it's Section 2. Let me just double check here. On line 18.1, we are taking the well, let me ask the first question. We're striking, so there was an appropriation of $50,000 or $50 million in 2024 to the Minnesota Forward Fund for providing businesses with matching funds required by federal programs. You're cutting that language. Can you explain why?
Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Senator, I believe you're referring to the Forward Fund, and the change is to eliminate the federal match requirement and to make the funds available until spent.
Senator Pratt?
And why are we doing that? I mean, why aren't we expecting those federal matching funds?
Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Senator, because the original laws that were established that created opportunities for Minnesota businesses to apply federally, such as the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, many of the programs created there that were the original matching requirement, federal opportunity that we were then wanting to match, are winding down, being changed, et cetera. Not entirely, but in a lot of cases. And so we want to make sure the funds are being used as efficiently as possible. So even in the absence of those, however, we are still seeing lots of great business expansion opportunities in Minnesota where MIF and JCF are helpful, but those can only get us so far. And so you could think of this change as supplementing MIF and JCF by enabling us to support more of those large expansions. And if we look at, for example, the Minnesota Chamber business expansion report that they do annually, and you look at the trend lines, we had a record year in 2024. Thanks to our great entrepreneurs in the state and our business environment, and the fact that DEED was able to put together some great incentive packages so we could do more of that with this change.
And
I'm going to go to Senator Champion, and then I also want to remind the committee we have about 5 minutes left, and we do need to stop at 2:30. So Senator Champion.
And just really quick, that was one of my questions as well, but once I listened to the president last night, for an example, and one of the things the president said last night referred directly to the CHIPS Act and whether he was going to get rid of it. And that was a part of the thinking when we thought about the match, and also encouraging businesses like your Biomade and others to really go after those federal funds. So looking at a way to still benefit entrepreneurs and innovation. And so that's sort of what I think I understand what they're trying to do, is not necessarily saying that I will do it, but that is something that I think that we have to do in real time. Thank you.
Senator Pratt, closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there are a number of other issues. One that sticks out in that same section is striking of the expiration of these funds on June 30th, 2027, and making them available until spent, and not canceling any unused funds back to the general fund. Senator Champion and I just saw a presentation on budget rules and guidelines that explicitly discourages that move, and I would hope that Senator Champion retakes a look at that as this bill continues to move forward. I'm concerned with the striking of the higher ed degrees. I'm concerned with and really don't understand on the partnership program. At the discretion of the board, a higher education institutions may charge up to a 30% increase on direct fund project costs. At a time that we are facing a $5 billion deficit and we're asking every Minnesotan to tighten their belts, as I said, this is not a budget that shows that state government is tightening their budget. In fact, we're pushing it off on, we're pushing off the financial responsibilities to local governments, and we're not relieving them of any of the responsibilities that they need. I think the not only the deed budget, but the governor's budget recommendations overall are irresponsible and I think need to be relooked at. And I hope that we can take the bipartisan criticism that we've seen with the governor's proposal and actually put something together that will work for Minnesotans and put Minnesotans first. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, if I could just say to Senator Pratt, that we'll certainly be entertaining all your thoughts and ideas as well, and let's look to see what we can do and if it works or not. Even if we don't get to the same place, at least I really want to work through it and try to make every attempt to do that. One last thing that I'd like for Dee to also consider is when we look at the operations increase, the cost of operation rises each year due to increases in legal services. And my understanding that DEED has counsel that is already a part of their operation, and they also get the benefit of the Attorney General's office. And so I just want to understand that, because my understanding the Attorney General's office is going to ask for their own budget, what it takes, and then for us to understand what that legal service increase would be when we think in terms of this line item. So just for future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Members, that concludes our business for this meeting. SF 1832 will be laid over for possible inclusion. That concludes our business for today. Next hearing will be Monday, March 10th.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. You did a wonderful